Good afternoon or happy lunchtime, whether it is afternoon or lunchtime for you. Hello, everybody. I am just going to wait for people to log in. I always get a bit nervous before doing Facebook Lives, which is ridiculous. It's the tech. It's the fact that something goes live on one screen and something goes live on another screen, and you're never quite sure where you're supposed to be looking. But anyway, hello. Easter is round the corner, and I have popped in today to talk a little bit about chocolate and the menopause. Any links between the two? Should we or shouldn't we? Do you or don't you? What's the gen on chocolate and our midlife hormones? Somebody once said to me, I bet you don't eat any chocolate. I bet you don't eat anything bad. I bet you don't. I bet you don't. I eat chocolate every single day. I am a chocolate aficionado, passionate. I don't know. I love a bit of chocolate. But I do think that it's quite nice to know a little bit about chocolate, the pros and cons. And so what I've done is I've written down some myths, I suppose, things that I wish I had known a long time ago, and things that might help you stop feeling guilty about chocolate if you love it. And if you don't love it, that's fine. But you may pick up a little bit of information that's interesting. So obviously, in theory, it's a plant food. It's a plant that grows on a tree. Chocolate does grow on trees, tends to grow in very tropical areas because it needs an awful lot of water for the cocoa beans to grow. And it's been around for thousands of years. And in fact, the Mayans, one of the early people that were known to use chocolate, they gave it as gifts in a very similar way as we do. And they said chocolate was always a gift from God. So today this plant fills the shelves, particularly at this time of year. And not only do we give chocolate at Easter, we give it in times of happiness, we give it in times of sadness, we give it to celebrate something, we give it to commiserate something. It seems to have links with making people feel better. And you know what? So it should. So here I go with some chocolate things that I want to share with you. First of all, I don't know, do you know that it's a fermented food? Everybody knows that sauerkraut and, I don't know, kimchi and all of these things that are fermented foods are really good for our guts. But actually, proper chocolate is also, well, any chocolate, but proper chocolate is really fairly well fermented. And so it's actually quite good for your gut. I don't know if you know what a cocoa bean looks like. This is a cocoa bean. There we are, like this. You've probably seen them. If you ever have cocoa nibs in something, it will come from something like this that's bashed up. So this is bean fermented, naturally fermented, and then roasted. And if you nibble it, it's not sweet, but you definitely get the cocoa-y taste. And in a cocoa pod that grows on a plant, which is about the size of a small rugby ball, there's about 50 of these little cocoa beans. So you don't get that many per rugby ball. So it takes quite a lot to make the amount of chocolate. I guess about 50 to make a proper bar of chocolate. So one of the questions that people often say is chocolate particularly bad for certain things? I wanted to bust some of those myths. Is chocolate bad for your heart? Well, actually, no. Sugar is bad for your heart. Fat is bad for your heart. But cocoa itself can actually be fairly cardioprotective if you eat it in the right amounts. So that's one thing I wanted to bust. Chocolate was the first bliss food, and I think this is the important thing when we connect it to being a woman in the perimenopause or menopause and trying to be aware of midlife weight gain. What is a bliss food? Have you heard that Pringles statement that says once you pop, you can't stop? You know that feeling where you take 2 Pringles and you eat them and then you go for 3 and you eat them, or anything where you eat one and then another one and another one. So our brains react to food that has the perfect amount of sugar and fat added to it to make us want more and more and more. And chocolate, when it is mass produced, is or was one of the very earliest bliss point foods that manufacturers made because they recognized that when humans ate them, they wanted more, therefore they purchased more, therefore their sales would go up. So if you are eating chocolate that is designed to make you eat more, then you're eating chocolate as a bliss food. If you're eating chocolate that is designed to make you really enjoy the cocoa taste, it's not formulated to bliss level. Therefore, you don't get the same cravings and you don't eat the same amount. I'll come back to that later. Chocolate gives you spots. When I was a little girl, my mother used to say, no, Samantha, you can't have chocolate, it gives you spots. Absolute rubbish. There has been no scientifically proven papers that chocolate either gives you spots or acne. And some people are still of the opinion that they can't eat chocolate for that reason. If that's you and you've avoided it for years, then no, that's not true. Chocolate is high in caffeine is another thing that people often say. Chocolate is not high in caffeine. Chocolate has a trace element of caffeine, but it actually has something called theobromine in it, which is similar to caffeine, but it doesn't keep you awake at night. In fact, there are there's a tribe of people who drink, I think it's something like 17 small cups of cocoa every single day. And not only do they sleep well, they also have a lower risk of cardiac issues. So actually, proper cocoa is incredibly healthy taken in the right amounts. So I wouldn't go worrying about it keeping you awake at night. It's far more likely if you have high sugar chocolate that's what's going to keep you awake at night. I've got a list of things here just because I didn't want to miss one out. Chocolate gives you migraines or headaches. That's another thing that people often say. There's a substance in chocolate called PEA. It's phenylethylamine or something like that. I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist, but it's a product that actually occurs in quite a lot of foods. And if you have a particular sensitivity or allergy to PEA, then yes, there is a possibility that chocolate may have that kind of effect on you. It may give you a headache, but actually the incidences are fairly low. And so unless you know you've got that problem, chocolate itself will not give you a headache. However, something that's very high in sugar may give you that issue. Okay, there's a myth that chocolate's bad for your gut. Again, as I said at the beginning, because these little gems, these cocoa beans, are fermented in their either completely pure state or fairly unadulterated state, actually, the gut responds really quite well to good chocolate. So I wouldn't go worrying about it being bad for your gut. So let's get on to the bit that you really want to know. I don't normally do this, but look, here's all these different types of chocolate that I particularly went and purchased because I wanted to talk about this. And then some other chocolate that I happen to have in the fridge because, as I say, I really like chocolate. So I thought I'd start with the whole milk versus dark chocolate thing. There isn't actually a recommended level that says when you go to, say, 70% cocoa solids, that is definitely dark chocolate. There isn't a level. In the UK, there is a level of 30% cocoa solids when a manufacturer is allowed to say that's chocolate. If it falls below that, in theory, it's not allowed to be seen as chocolate. Now this has 24% cocoa solids in it. This, 34% cocoa solids in it. Hershey's, I don't have Hershey's, I don't live in America, has 12% cocoa solids in it. Chocolate comes from cocoa. That lovely taste that you get in your nose and in your mouth comes from cocoa. So you want, if you like cocoa, to have as high amount of cocoa solids as feels good for you to get the benefits from that chocolate, rather than going for something that's cheap and cheerful. And what may be quite surprising, this isn't Bournville, but here this is a dark chocolate alternative. This, even though it says it's dark chocolate, has still only got 42% cocoa solids in it. So when we were little, I don't know about you, but when we were little, we always knew that there was chocolate that we had and then dark chocolate that perhaps your grandma had, and that generally was Bournville. Well, actually, there wasn't that much chocolate in that. So what should you potentially be doing as a chocolate lover in the perimenopause or menopause? And basically that means that we're trying to watch our weight a little bit and make sure that we have all the things that we enjoy without feeling restricted. Well, I would say initially that If you choose the chocolate that's got the least ingredients on it when you go and buy your chocolate, you're much more likely to be getting a chocolate that's really good for you. It shouldn't start with sugar. It shouldn't start with sweeteners. It should start with cocoa and then maybe cocoa butter. Then you might get some milk and then you might get some sugar. Now, chocolate that's mass produced has to have something that means that when they churn it, it goes through the pipes really easily. And that's often something called lecithin. So you may see that in the listing. If you go for a craft chocolate, I particularly love Hotel Chocolat chocolate. If you go for a craft chocolate, they ferment and package this on a much, much smaller scale so they can get away with less lecithin in it. But when you go for something that's produced on such a mass as this, it's not fermented as long, and they also have to add lots of oil to it to make it go through the machines a bit better. So if you can try and aim for something with as fewer ingredients in it as possible, and certainly that sugar is not the first thing on the list, then that's going to give you the right chocolate. The other really good tip is to think that you're going to savour it rather than stuff it. Now, actually, that works for anything food-wise at our age, doesn't it? We need to feel satisfied rather than stuffed. And if you're going to eat a great big bar of this, because it's designed at that bliss point, there's nothing in your brain to stop you. But when you eat a good quality dark chocolate, we just can't eat as much. So that's why it's actually much better to go for this dark 60-70% cocoa solid chocolate if you can, because you don't get that bliss point in your brain and you just don't keep chucking it down. 20 to 25 grams. So that's normally, I've got one open here. That's normally 2 of these squares. Now, I sound like I'm being really controlling, aren't I? But you know what? We've got to that stage in our lives where if we do want to manage our midlife weight, we have to be fairly controlling. Of course, you can fill your boots and eat all of this, but there's nothing in your brain that's going to stop you. And it's going to start to show up in ways that you're not comfortable with. Not only just around your waist, but obviously there's negative things with all that sugar and all that fat as well. So 20 to 25 grams. There may be a point that you're saying, well, okay, I get all of this, but I hate dark chocolate. And you know what? A lot of people do. Some people will do super milk chocolate, which is 40 or 50% cocoa solids, but it's got extra milk added to it. If you had a mouthful of milk in your mouth and you let it run around your tongue, eventually it would become a little bit sweeter because milk has got milk sugars in it. And so some chocolate suppliers make a dark chocolate, but they add extra milk into it, so it's a little bit sweeter. So you could work your way up from 30-40% chocolate to 40 or 50% chocolate. When you can get to around 60, you're training your taste buds to enjoy the cocoa rather than the fat or the sugar wafting over your tongue. So it may take some time. You may have to be quite diligent about it. You may not want to go to banishing your galaxy and going straight for a 70% dark chocolate. That may be too much for you. But if you can start to think about it in that way, it's interesting how you can retrain your taste buds. The Japanese have this idea of having a second stomach. I don't know how many of you have had kids who have said, well, I'm full up on my savoury side, but I've got some room for pudding. And that's because they've actually done MRI scans on people during a meal, and they've shown that even though you're completely full, having eaten this big savoury meal, when somebody puts something sweet in front of you, maybe a slice of chocolate brownie or something like that, something in your brain triggers and there's some room suddenly in your stomach. Now, we haven't got a second stomach. I can't remember what the Japanese term for it is. We're not like cows, we haven't got a second stomach. But it has been proven that a small amount of something sweet like chocolate actually is quite a good digestive. And it also stops you from saying, yes, I won't have the trifle, I won't have a big slab of whatever, but I will have a little bit of chocolate. And between you and me, I often keep a couple of squares in my handbag. I know that sounds awful. You're out with the girlfriends, you're having a really nice evening, you've eaten, you've had your wine. Incidentally, often more sugar in our glass of wine than in decent chocolate. You've had your wine, you've treated yourself to a starter, it was lovely. All the puddings are really enormous, nobody wants to share with you. Fine, have yourself a lovely mint tea, a couple of squares of chocolate. Nobody knows I've got my handbag under the table, and that's what I do. It stops me from having something just for the sake of it, because I also love something sweet at the end of a meal. So, with all of the Easter eggs out there, go and have a really nice time, but see if you can start to embrace chocolate as being actually a health food, something that you can eat every day, because you start to tweak the way that you eat it. You try and spend as much money as you're prepared to spend on a smaller amount of chocolate, which you savour rather than stuff, and then it becomes part of the treats that you have every single day, but you still manage to keep on top of it as a food rather than putting on weight as a result of it. I hope you all have a lovely Easter. Thank you very much for sticking with me in this lovely Facebook group over the years that I've been here. There's lots more to come. Some of you know I've got a new 6-week Ditch the Diet program starting in May. Obviously the exercise classes are pausing for 4 days over Easter, but I'm here to motivate and inspire you, and as a community we support each other. Have a lovely Easter, everybody. See you soon. Bye.